Hi guys, it's Matt. Welcome to the video. I am a compulsive gambler in recovery and I'm your mind and movement mentor here to help you. So today I'm going to try and do the very difficult, almost impossible task of explaining what it is like to have a gambling addiction. For people who are problem gamblers, compulsive gamblers, this will probably feel very relatable. For others, probably difficult to relate to, but hopefully somewhat informative into the mind of a compulsive gambler. And I'm going to share like a story from personal experience to kind of help demonstrate that. So I was thinking before I turned the camera on, what story would summarize this, and there are countless. There are really several. I think, if I'm honest with you, probably a large number that I have blocked out of my mind. But there's one that kind of came to mind, which I will share, that kind of really does summarize the feeling of what it's like. So back in my gambling days, I used to bet a lot on sports, almost entirely football, as in soccer, for those watching in the US. And most of the games would take place on a Saturday. So as the week started to come to an end, there would often be midweek fixtures as well that I would be gambling on. But as I was kind of moving towards the Saturday, there would be a increased, I suppose you could say, feeling of excitement around it. I would be starting to look at the fixtures, to think about who was playing who, to kind of hypothetically put together bets in my mind of what I thought was going to happen. I would sometimes be watching like preview shows, sometimes other YouTube videos of people that were predicting results and things like that, to kind of stir the pot of anticipation and excitement of what was going to happen on the weekend. And then we kind of get to Friday, and there would only be a handful of football fixtures on Friday, like one or two in the evening, maybe a few different ones in the day based on different time zones, but absolutely nothing compared to what was going to take place on the Saturday. And by Friday, I would kind of be ready to gamble. I'd be thinking about what I was going to do, and I would be surmising in my mind and putting the world to rights with my own personal opinions and how I was going to make all this money and what was definitely going to happen, and etc, etc. But then, so say on Friday, I would have an early start at work. I work in fitness, so I would sometimes have a client at say 6:30 or 7 a.m. on a Friday. I'd sometimes have clients clustered together, but I'd sometimes have a gap. And say, for example, I had a gap around 8 a.m. I would be so compelled to gamble by this time that I would be looking to gamble on almost anything. So an example would be the football in Australia would always be in the morning. It would usually be about 9 a.m., sometimes 8:30, 8:45 a.m. And there would be one or two games on a Friday. And by the time I'd finished with that first client, I would be completely focused on going, and I wouldn't be able to stop myself from gambling on that game. I'd be telling it to myself that I could just win a bit here so that I'd have more money for my grand strategy that's going to take place at the weekend. And even though I could not name you one player that was on the field, I couldn't tell you what league standings the teams were in, I couldn't tell you anything at all about the game. I would just go out from the gym where I worked and close around to the local bookmakers and put a bet on that game. And it would almost be like absolutely nothing could stop me from doing it. In my mind, I would be saying to myself, you can't even pronounce these teams. You have no idea what's going to happen here. You're pulling this bet out of thin air. There's no logic to this at all. You've not thought this through. you know, and I'd try and find a bet. Like I'd look at how many goals had been in their last few games, and I'd be like, oh, well, the last two have had less than 3, so it must be more than 3. Or I'd look at the number of corners or something like that. And in my mind, I would be like, stop being silly. The gambling day is tomorrow. You've been thinking about the Saturday that is coming. What is this? We know nothing about Australian football. Just stop. But my brain would be saying this, but my body would be in motion. So as I was saying this to myself, I would be getting in the car. I would be driving to the bookmakers. And you know, like when you have those car journeys when you think back on it and it's like, I can't even remember how I got here. Like, did I even signal or check my mirrors? Like, I was completely on autopilot this whole journey. It would be like that times 10. I don't know how I would navigate through the traffic, how I would remember to indicate at roundabouts, that kind of thing. And I'd often be such a frantic pace that I would pull the car up on double yellow lines, or I would just say I got there at 8:42 and it's kicking off at 8:45. Never would I even think to buy a parking ticket to, like, for pay and display. It wouldn't matter if I was going to get a fine. It would like kind of dilute into what was going to be gambled with the funds. It would be absolutely irrelevant. And there would be absolutely no logical thinking going on at all until I got there, heart beating out of its chest, usually probably out of breath, in a bit of kind of a frenzy, frantic state that the person in the bookmaker's shop would definitely notice. Anyone that kind of bumped into me would clearly notice. If I was to bump into an old friend or something when I was in that state to go, I'm not even sure they would recognise me. I don't even think I would be able to stop for small talk. I would just keep going in motion and probably just spout somewhere that I had to be at that time, just completely being run by almost like a satanic type energetic force. And I've done other videos on my opinions of that kind of thing and kind of where the nature of addiction stems from. And then I would only kind of slow down once the bet had been placed. And I'd only kind of sort of come back to, I would say, normal thinking, because I'd be completely in the height of addiction at that time. But I'd only kind of settle down to like a normal baseline level of energy and be able to kind of look around and take in the people and the place of kind of where it was like I was kind of in a vacuum kind of that whole time, almost just like a tunnel, where it was so kind of like blinkered of just, I was going to do one thing and one thing only. And often I would lose that bet and I'd be so incredibly frustrated about myself for a number of different reasons. One, because I would then reverse engineer the logical conversations I was having with myself about that part of me that was like, you know nothing about Australian football. Why are you bothering to do this? And kind of thinking, well, there was that side of me that didn't really want to do this, even though I had absolutely no choice at the time, just completely and utterly compelled. And then that would kind of just lead to further frustration, because I've got all this thought of that I'm gambling on a Saturday in my mind, and now I'm either doing that with a diminished level of funds because I've just lost some money, or I'm maybe not even doing that at all, which is just odd because that was the one I was waiting for, but I almost didn't have the level of patience to wait. I had to do something before then, even though that was the one that apparently was definitely going to win because I had all the stats lined up, because I know all about it, because I've got my scheme and I know my football and that kind of thing. And yeah, I mean, I guess that's like a bit of a crazy story, but it's one of those ones where I just wanted to kind of highlight the range of emotions, really. Because it probably feels very, very unrelatable, and someone who doesn't have a problem with gambling would be like, you're an idiot, why don't you just stop? The classic kind of cliches. To someone who is compulsive, that probably feels oh too familiar. But my goal here was to just try and kind of shed some light on the frenzied state that gambling addiction leads to once you get into the problem kind of compulsive territory with it. So I hope that helps in some way, shape or form. I always say I make these videos for a younger version of myself to help try and understand the mindset of problem gambling, for tips and tricks to try to troubleshoot and help me stay proactive in my recovery when I make these videos. And if you know anyone that would benefit from this information, please feel free to share it with them. It's a topic I'm incredibly passionate about. And if you comment, I'd love to know your own personal experience with this kind of thing. I respond to all the comments, and engaging with the posts and liking and subscribing to the channel just help me grow it and reach more people. And for that, I'm very grateful. So thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video very soon.